Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Deep End with Ed podcast.
The Deep End.
The Deep End
The Deep End.
with Ed Robinson.
The Deep End.
This is season number 3, where our theme is leadership from the inside out. Translated, leaders who are making a difference in their area of influence. And so we have a very exciting guest today. I'll introduce you to my guest very shortly. But before doing so, I always like to give you a Lifeguard Tower moment. That is something that we can do for someone else. And what I want you to do is to check in with a senior citizen in your family, in your neighborhood, and on your job, and your ministry, wherever it may be, and check in to make sure that they are not being victims of scammers. There's a lot of identity theft individuals who are out there and they're calling people and telling them that, hey, your lights are going to be turned up, your gas is going to be turned up, your phone is going to be turned off, the IRS is going to garnish your wages or come to arrest you. And it's really causing a lot of confusion with individuals. And I've been speaking with people over the last couple of weeks, and it's crazy the stories that I hear. I'm not a representative of the IRS or the utilities, but I suffice it to say that IRS nor the utilities will call and say, hey, look, we're going to come and turn everything off right now, or we're going to garnish your wages unless you give us a credit card number. So if someone calls and it tells you that, hang up the phone, don't give them any information, and then call the police department to report it. But in the meantime, our coachable moment is to make sure that we are checking on our senior citizens to ensure that they are not being caught up in these type of crazy like scams. Well, I am really excited to present to some and introduce to others my guest. He's well known, very popular. He's been seen all over the scene, so to speak, especially the television sports landscape. His name is Rahshaun Haylock. He is with KTLA Channel 5. He is a sports journalist. He's a reporter, a play-by-play announcer. I was first introduced to him when I used to see him on the sidelines doing the Fox Sports West high school games. He's done college basketball games, the football games. He's all over the board and well respected in what he does. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about Rahshaun on this episode. And so if you have young folks in your family who are interested in the world of sports, because a lot of times people think that in sports, you got to be on the field, you got to be on the court, you got to be here and there. No, you don't have to be in all those areas. There are a whole bunch of areas that you can do behind the scenes and in front of the cameras. And this young man, Rahshaun Haylock, happens to be before the camera. Rahshaun, so welcome to the show, to the podcast. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here and just rolling with a poor boy from Compton. So first of all, man, how you doing?
Well, first of all, Ed, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Very excited to be on here with you today. And look, hey, Compton and Watts together. Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
You got it. And it's amazing, that you said that, because I grew up in Watts and then now I still live in Compton, and you have some roots in Watts, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But for those of you that are either listening to this podcast or you're watching this podcast on Spotify or Apple, you're looking at this young man and say, not me, but him. Looking at this young man, I know him. So again, this is, as I said in my introduction, this is Rahshaun Haylock, and he is a KTLA sports journalist. He is a sports announcer. He does play-by-play announcing. He does it all. And this young man has been all over the place. So we're going to get a chance to just take some time and connect with Rahshaun. Our theme for our third season, as you know, is leadership from the inside out. So these are leaders who are making a difference in different segments of society. So Rahshaun, tell us a little bit about your, where are you from? Were you born and raised, your family, whatever you'd like to share?
Well, I'm from right here in the city. I grew up in Watts. I was born in the Valley. Actually, moved to the Nickerson Gardens at the age of 4. From 4 to 17, I lived there in the projects before going off to Cal State Northridge, and it was there that I majored in broadcast journalism. From there, had an internship at Channel 2 and Channel 9. And it was at that time where I started to kind of make some inroads. When I started, the web isn't anything what it is now, right? So it was just like, oh yeah, sure, you go play on the internet, go have fun, right? And so I was able to get some on-camera experience doing that. That led to me networking and meeting some people at Fox Sports West, where I started as a researcher and then as a columnist, and
Yeah.
that paved the way for me to start doing some sideline reporting for them. First game was a CIF Southern Section Basketball Championship Mater Day against Etowanda. It was Stanley Johnson's junior year. He was taking on Dave Kleckner's Etowanda team. Jordan McLaughlin was on that team, who's now in the NBA as well. And I just remember thinking like, oh, they messed up. They gave me a chance, and literally it was as free as I've ever felt doing a broadcast. In all honesty, I just went out there. I really felt like I was playing with house money, and got a text from my boss later that night. As I was writing my article, because I was still doing double duty, and next thing I know, they offered me the entire football package and then the Big West college basketball package as well when they had that, and just been trying to continue to make inroads, from there on.
Rahshaun, in your own right, you are a leader as far as I'm concerned. So I want to go back on something that you said earlier. So you grew up in the Nickerson Gardens housing project. And so while you were a kid there in the Nickerson Gardens, I mean, I'm from Watts, in Compton, and you saw a whole lot of different things. How did you not get caught up?
Oh man, it's easy. It's well, God won, but also my mother and my grandmother, they they literally gave me boundaries. Like, don't you cross this street, don't you cross that street over there. Make sure it wasn't necessarily a street light thing type of thing, but it was, if I come outside, I better be able to look and see you, right? Like there was no, I grew up right there on Success Avenue, and so it was right off of Imperial, right where you turn in, and so there was no going deep into the projects, right, for me, right? And if I did, I'd better talk to somebody or ask somebody about it first, just to make sure it was cool. Like the gym was maybe a couple blocks away. Like if I was gonna go over there, like I better let somebody know, And so, I think that's really what it was. But I mean, it's there. I mean, there's so much for you to get into. I was recruited to join a gang, in the eighth grade. There's drugs, there's alcohol, there's all kind of stuff for you to get into. I've seen people younger than me pass away because of, just the foolishness in the streets. The streets have their way of handling of doing things and operating, right, and so you just try to stay as far away from that as possible. But I mean, you're young, you're growing up, you're knucklehead, you make some bad decisions as well, but I mean, I'm just super blessed that I was covered.
Got you. So Rahshaun, it seems to me that your mom and your grandmother are a huge influence in your life. Talk about the influence of them.
Huge, man, huge. My mom, she instilled that work ethic, right? And so, mom was always working, always working, always work. But I mean, we understood because she was trying to, make a better way for us, and that meant we spent a lot of time with our grandmother, and she's from the country, Sasaco, Oklahoma, right? So I mean, she moved here when her husband was in the military, and if you know anything about the history of the projects, like that was where a lot of military folks lived, and she just never left, right? But she instilled just some of those values, right? And I think there's so many things, right? We just celebrated a birthday of hers in January, her 98th birthday. Wow, yeah. And so there's so many things that I take away from her, but one of them that stays with me, I think, most often is people don't have to be nice to you, right? And so whenever people are nice, or they show gratitude, or they go out of their way to do something for me, I want to always make sure I express my gratitude. I'll go above and beyond, to say thank you at times. Like I'll say thank you 5 times just so you can know, like I really like I really mean it. Like thank you, I really appreciate it. And I think that was it. But then also, we would see her going to church every Sunday, and it took a while for it to catch on, for me, but it became a point where like that was our thing. Like we would go regularly, like we would walk to church every Sunday. And so
It seems like church is important to you. Is that
yeah,
that's
no, it's huge because I mean, look, I I know that um I know this isn't about me, right? So uh it would be foolish of me to think that, I'm out here and, I'm living literally living my dream, right? I'm doing the job that I've always wanted to have since I was a little boy, but it'd be foolish of me to think that like I'm the one doing this. Like I got here on my own and like when that's not the case, like I'm a firm believer that there's a reason why I'm here, and like I said earlier, like I've been covered, like there have been health challenges, there have been the streets, there have been all these things, that God has kept me from or brought me through, right? And so it'd be foolish of me to think that this is all me, like this is all my doing. That's how I personally look at it.
oh, I like that. So Rahshaun, you said as a little boy, when did you know? When did you have this epiphany? When did you have this moment? When did you realize I want to do what Chick Hearn and all of those cats are doing? When did that hit you, man?
You said it. It was Chick Hearn. Like that was my guy growing up. So I mean, I remember going back as like early as 4 years old, and whenever he was on, I would prop right in front of the television and just soak up all the things that Chick said, and I would be able to retain it. And it like whenever Chick was on, it was appointment TV for me. And then obviously growing up in the projects, we didn't have cable, so the only Laker games that were on were road games. And so it was Chick Hearn. It was watching the games, but it was also the halftime show that I look forward to. And he'd interview some Laker players, but he'd interview players, from the opposing team at halftime as well, which I thought was so weird. It's like all of a sudden, like the stadium was empty, right? Like, why is the stadium empty now? Like, and I realized like it was recorded, right? But just certain things that you don't know, as a kid. But I mean, Chick Hearn was my guy, and all of a sudden, like I could recite things. I knew Magic's height and weight, or AC Green, or where he went to college, or Worthy, Byron Scott, what have you. And so, my dad.
While you were a preteen and a teenager, you were learning all of these.
Yeah, no, I was like 4 or 5 years old learning all this stuff. Yeah. And so like my dad, we would go out like, and around some of his friends and stuff, and he would just sort of like parade me around, like my cousins or like certain people in the family. They'd be like, what jersey number is this player? How tall is this player? And I would just be able just to spit this stuff out as like a 5-year old, and I mean, it was just normal to me. Like I didn't realize like it was such a big deal. But like whenever we would go somewhere or we would get around family, whatever, like I would get these quizzes and then I would have to answer, all these questions. But and I was able to get them right because of all the stuff that I'd heard from Chick Hearn.
Man, Chick Hearn's quips, quotes, and anecdotes. He has some powerful ones. I never forget, Rahshaun. I was watching a game one day, and he said the following. It was something along the lines that the Lord and his 12 disciples can't help this team. And I something about what is about the something about the milk is getting cold, the butter's getting hard. I don't know how to say it, but
Yeah, that was the game. The game. That's when he put the game in the refrigerator. That's when he meant it was over. There was only one time his entire career he put a game in the refrigerator, and it ended up not being true. I remember watching that game. It was the Lakers and the Suns, and Chick had put it away, and Stu was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" A little premature, and it ended up coming back to bite him. But that was the only time his whole career that ever happened, to my recollection.
So, Rahshaun, did you ever waver? Did you ever vacillate from, okay, you knew you wanted to be a sports a journalist, but did you ever waver like, okay, there's other careers or?
Yeah, so the only other thing I thought about was coaching basketball. So I was in high school, I was a manager for the basketball team, and then I ended up being able to do that for Bobby Braswell at Cal State Northridge for 4 years. And the last 2 of those years, I got the opportunity to travel. And normally, if you're a team manager, that most team managers, they want to get into coaching, right? And so I got and I was able to do a little bit of coaching in high school during spring league because the high school coach couldn't coach. It was against CIF rules during the time, so he sort of entrusted me to do it during spring league, and I enjoyed it. And so my first job out of college was coaching high school basketball at Cypress High. I was coaching freshman ball, and I did that for 2 years. And I had a boss at Channel 2 was like, all right, you're doing like I had just a bunch of different like odd jobs, right? And so he's like, you have a future either behind the camera or in front of the camera, but at a certain point, like you're gonna have to make a decision. So what are you gonna do here? And so, but there was a time where I considered like I wanted to be a college Division 1 head basketball coach, but at that point it was kind of like, all right, like what do I really want to do here? And I ended up going the broadcast route, and it's thankfully, it's worked out.
It's amazing, Rahshaun, because I researched you and looked at some various things about you, whatever. And you said it earlier. You were talking about all of these different jobs. It kind of remind me of what is that show? I don't know if you remember it. You may be too young. In Living Color.
You got 33 jobs, man.
But I want to go back to one of your earlier jobs. It's my understanding that you at one time worked at In-N-Out Burger. And how has that helped you for broadcasting? What's
Yeah, that's a good one. So that's funny. Everything that I do, I feel like it helps for something else. No matter what it is, it could be just way out there, right? I always felt like I was always trying to find like how can this help me, in my broadcasting career. And so in and out, it was. I mean, everything's quick pace, right? Fast pace, right? Like those. I mean, you've seen the lines, like those are real, right? And so inside, like we really gotta, be on it, trying to get people their burgers and fries. But it was always, just in terms of, how you treat people, right? Like, the smile is part of your uniform. But the one thing that stood out to me that I think is probably the most relatable that people may not necessarily think about, working in the drive-through, right? And it's I have this headset on and someone's talking to me, giving me their order while there may be someone at the window that I have to have a conversation with, or maybe one of my teammates that I have to have a conversation with, all at the same time, right? And if you're in TV, reporters, they wear this earpiece called an IFB, right? So you could be talking and there could be a producer in your ear at the same time as you're talking, telling you where to go or what's going to happen next. And so I think that's one of the most relatable things. And I sort of really took to that and tried to focus and hone in on that, knowing that, one day, like I'm gonna have to wear this IFB and I'm gonna have to be able to manage when someone's talking to me, if I'm talking to someone, but then someone's also talking to me in my ear. So I think that was probably one of the more relatable things. But I did that for like maybe 6 years on and off, in college and even after college, a little bit. Store 60, Long Beach Traffic Circle. Shout out to all my people out there. But it was a great time, and I really enjoyed it. And the true telltale sign of a place that you worked at, if food is related, if you can still eat the food, then it's a great place. And I still eat In-N-Out, even though I ate it every day when I worked there.
Cool. That's amazing, the transferable skills from In-N-Out and the multitasking and all the things you so aptly described. Now, when I first met you, that is at via media, I would always see you on the CIF Southern Section games of the week. Are there any games that just stand out? I would see you with all of the energy and your verbal rapability. Anything that just stood out to you, or any of the games, epic games?
There were a few games. There was a game, I want to say it was 2013. It might be my first season on the sideline. Bishop Gorman against Santa Margarita, and that was a game went to overtime. I believe it's the only overtime game we did. And
Las Vegas?
Bishop? Yeah, from Las Vegas. Yeah, they came down here to South Orange County to take on Santa Margarita, and that game was it was close. It went to overtime. Gorman ended up winning it. And it would have been a huge win for Santa Margarita to beat that Bishop Gorman team, because they were, nationally ranked and all that. Tough call at the end against Santa Margarita that kind of, went against them. Otherwise, I think they probably would have won that game. It was a tough game in overtime that sort of went against them. But the other game I would have to say was probably the last game that I did. It was St. John Bosco against Mater Dei for the 2019 Open Division Championship, and that was Bryce Young versus DJ Uyangalele. The last time they met as high schoolers, and Mater Dei was in full control. They were up, I want to say, something like 23-5 or something like that at intermission, and DJ brought Bosco all the way back, and they ended up winning the Southern Section title, and they went on to win the Open Division bowl game as well for the state championship. But that game sticks out too, because it was like the top two quarterbacks in the country, and it wasn't the first time we did this one, but it was the top two quarterbacks in the country. And we had saw them meet, previous times as well. But it was the last time we were going to see this on this stage. And in terms of Southern California high school football, I'm not sure if or when we will be able to see that ever again. And it was such a treat to watch DJ. It was such a treat to watch Bryce, and just to go on and see what Bryce has done in his collegiate career. Winning the Heisman Trophy, his first year as a starter is just it's great. It's great to see.
And it's amazing that you called out that game, St. John Bosco against Modern Day. I was at that game. It was at Cerritos College.
Yes.
Remember, it was almost like something about what Chick said about the refrigerator, like the game was over. So there's a young protege of mine. I don't know if you heard the name, Jalen Woods. Jalen Woods played linebacker for St. John Bosco. He and I went to the same church. Actually, I had him on an episode, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes ago. And I was at the game and I was watching my son and I was like, oh man, this don't look good. They were rolling. It
was getting ugly, right?
All of a sudden they came back. I mean, that was a huge game. But I just remember seeing you always on the sideline talking and encouraging the young players, whether they were male, female, basketball, football, whatever. And so that was when I first had my eye on. I'm like, man, that young brother's doing some things.
It was, I mean, look, and I've always kind of high school sports is such a niche sport, right? And like I was able to sort of carve a lane for myself as like the high school guy per se, because I'm here in LA, right? Like there's 11 pro sports teams. There's all this stuff going on. That's excluding USC and UCLA, obviously, right? So there's all this stuff going on, right? So if I want to get some camera time, if I want to get my face on the screen, which ways can I do that, right? Because I mean, you got Jim Hill, he's doing all these different things, yada yada yada. But like high school was sort of like this untapped market, right? So if I'm going to get reps, like where am I going to get those at, right? And then there was also like this love affair that started in high school. I went to El Segundo High School, which is not close to where I grew up. And so to kill time, I would go to the library and I would read the Daily Breeze. And I thought it was they had this great prep section. And I always thought it was so cool seeing my friend's name in the paper. And so I would just, I would do that constantly, read that. And that ended up being, reading the LA Times and stuff as well and getting acclimated. But look, and the goal, of course, was to get to a position, obviously, to cover, pro sports, which, thankfully I'm able to do now with KTLA. But I will say this, there's nothing like Friday Night Lights. There's nothing like it, because players will tell you this, they've been in the league for years, right? Like those are the times that they remember the most. Those are the times they have so much fun. Like you ask a player a question, you bring up something about a player, his high school career, something he did in high school, he just lights up, right? And most of them don't like talking to us at all, right? I mean, just to be perfectly honest, like a lot of guys don't like dealing with the media. But you mentioned something that they did in high school, and it's like they light up, and you can start a conversation. And so because those are great memories, and you don't even have to be a player to have great Friday Night Lights memories, right? I mean, it brings the school together, it brings the community together. It's just a great pastime that we have here in America, and I had a ball doing it.
Oh, and it was very evident too. It showed. I mean, it just emanated through the screen, the microphone, and everything that you were doing. Now, when you went from high school to CSUN, and now you're going to broadcast journalist major, which is something I wish I would have did when I was in college, but no, what I'm trying to figure out now. But when you went there, was it like overwhelming? Was it, dude, I'm living my best life?
No, it was very much overwhelming. I remember the first night I got there, after my mom left, she dropped me off, and I mean, obviously got a little bit emotional. She was dropping off her baby, and I'd been around, my mom, first time being on my own, obviously, right? And so, but I remember just getting on my knees and praying, like, Lord, like, please help me to get through this. Because like if we're keeping it a buck, like I was not a great high school student at all, right? I was interested in basketball and girls, and that was pretty much it, right? I mean, and so like I had the potential, like I could get by, and I knew that I could get by, and so that was just sort of, whatever I could do to get by, that was kind of what I was going to do. And then the rest of my focus was going to be on hoop and girls for the most part. And so, but it got to the point where it was, I was what you would call a marginal student. Right. And so, my high school would not support me in applying to 4-year colleges. And look, it was in my house, my mom, she graduated from CSUN. College wasn't
It wasn't an option.
It wasn't an option. Like you were doing this, or you were going to have to find another place to live, right? So like college, it wasn't like something like this was something I always knew that I wanted. I knew college was always going to be the next step, right? But I don't know that I necessarily prepared myself from, an academic standpoint to be able to take advantage of it from that standpoint. And so the counselors at my school, as I mentioned, like they were not supportive of me applying to college. So I had to go on my own. Like my mom and I, like we found some people who, were used to dealing with, kids who, were college eligible, who could make it in college, but maybe didn't have that body of work, so to speak. And who wanted to go to a 4-year and not necessarily start, at a JC. And so we found some people and we were able to, make it work and get into a few colleges, thankfully. And so, but all you hear is like how college is so hard. And, and I'm hearing those old counselors, from my old high school, like, oh, you're not college ready. You're not going to make it, this, that, or other. So you have all these voices, whatever. Right. And so, the doubt obviously creeps in, like, am I qualified for this? Am I going to be able to do this, that, or the other. Right. And so, and then you hear the stories, like you go to orientation, right? Look to your right, look to your left. Like that person won't be there by the time you like, am I going to be that person? Like, so like all this stuff, creeps in and my mom, she's a college graduate, obviously. And so, it was a big goal of mine to be able to match her and to graduate earlier, sooner than, and least amount of time than she did. And so, it was very, very overwhelming, but once I settled in, we were able to get it done, thankfully. But in the beginning, there was a lot of doubt. I don't know that I necessarily felt comfortable until after my first semester, right? Because there were a couple of classes in there where it was like make or break, right? Like either you pass this class or you gone, right? And so I had 2 of those, and so it wasn't until after maybe getting through that I was kind of maybe able to take a little bit of a deep breath and be like, okay, like I'm here, all right, let's do this.
Thank you for being vulnerable in that area, because there may be those that are listening who are in that situation and like, wow. And when I continue with your journalistic trajectory or even your leadership, I know you also worked at Fox West Prime Ticket. You also called games for ESPN. And what I didn't know that you were calling games also for the Angels at one point.
No, so I was a beat writer for the Angels. And that was with FoxSportsWest.com. So that was kind of one of my first jobs. And then with that, I think there's maybe like a time or two I'll get on like their pregame or their postgame show to sort of promote the articles that I was writing for the website.
Okay. So again, you're very multifaceted. So you can write, you can produce, you can go on air along those lines. What is your routine, Rahshaun? What do you do when you know that, man, I got to go hit the big, you're at Channel 5, you're at, the big station. How do you get ready for that?
Yeah, it's kind of, it kind of depends on what the assignment is that day, right? Like, the prep I have for Channel 5 may be different for the prep I have for a game, right? And then the prep I have as a play-by-player is probably different than the prep I have as a sideline reporter, right? So it just sort of depends on what's going on that day. But with Channel 5 in particular, it's what's the assignment going to be that day, right? And then for me, like I'm not a big this goes across every medium, right? I'm not a big numbers guy. I'm not a big stats guy. I'm not a big analytics are great. If that's your lane, God bless you. That's not my lane. Like I'm more into storytelling, right? So not that number 17 averages this many points, that many rebounds, that many assists, but like who is number 17, right? Like who is the person, wearing this uniform? And so that's kind of what it is that that intrigues me the most, and that's kind of like how I like to approach things. That's whether I'm calling the game, that's whether I'm doing sidelines, or that's even if I'm reporting, for KTLA. And so it always starts, and another thing that goes across all three, it always starts with like, what are the major storylines, right? And so, obviously if it's Super Bowl week, that stuff sort of speaks for itself. I remember there was a during Super Bowl week, there was something with Odell Beckham Jr. where him being traded here, or not traded, but him signing here with the Rams was great for him because he got to be reunited in a sense with one of his personal trainers. And so as soon as Odell got here, he went to go work out with his guy. And he's been able to have, a lot more consistent work with this guy since he's been here. And it didn't stop, once they got to the playoffs or once they got to the Super Bowl. Like 2 nights before the Super Bowl, he was going to go get some light work with the guy, once again. So like, that type of stuff, those stories that take you maybe a little bit behind the curtain, I think are the ones that hit home the most, and what people are saying, how people feel about certain situations. I think that's kind of what that's what I'm into the most. And I feel like that's what I want to convey the most to the viewers, because at the end of the day, like, this is a people business, right? Like a lot of people don't remember stats, right? But you will remember a nugget from your favorite player. Like if his favorite meal or his pregame meal is chicken parm, like, you're probably going to remember that more than you're going to remember, oh, he averaged 15 points per game, his second year in the league, right? And so I think that stuff sort of resonates. And so that's kind of the approach that I normally take with it.
That's powerful. It kind of, when you were talking about that, it kind of reminded me of something that Maya Angelou once said. She says, people may never forget what you said or what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
How you treat them. Absolutely.
Think about that, what you just said.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you try, I mean, even, in this business where you're crafting relationships, and like on Friday nights, for example, right? Like you want that to be, if I'm getting a walk off with, a young man after a great football game, like, I want that to be a memorable experience for him. So like, I'm going to try to bring the energy and liven it up. And if that person is a little bit closed off, I'm going to try to get him to open up a little bit, and hopefully like he remembers that experience and can go back. And that's something that he can watch, for the rest of it. Like, he can show his kids, like, one day your daddy was the man back in the day, like, so, that's, I mean, it's about people at the end of the day.
So Rahshaun, tell us about the first time that you're on camera. What was that experience like? I mean, dude, in 5, 4, 3, 2, bam.
Okay, so there's one experience that stands out to me, and this was not live. So as a production assistant at Channel 2, sometimes we get to go to games or whatever, right? And so we go to games, and then we kind of help out the photographers, and we be back and forth on the phone with the station saying, okay, we talked to this person, that person, whatever, or this is coming your way, be ready for this, so they can know what to put on the news later that night. And so after all the work's done, right, us PAs, or interns, we would get to shoot a stand-up on the court or on the field or wherever we were that day. And a stand-up is basically you in front of the camera holding the microphone, giving or delivering some sort of report, right?
Right.
And this was a Clipper game. I want to say it was a Laker Clipper game, but it was a Clipper home game. But anyways, I'm on the floor at Staples Center. Oh, my eyes were this big. I couldn't get the words out. I mean, and then I just felt like there weren't a lot of people there. Like, obviously the whole arena had cleared, but like there was still like some media types there because they were wrapping up their news stuff. But I just felt like everyone was watching me, and like I couldn't really remember what I wanted to say or how I wanted to say it, and it just was not happening. And I remember a buddy of mine, Beto Duran, who he was with 17 ESPN at the time, but now you see he does boxing. He's actually with Channel 2 right now as well. But we kind of came up together doing community cable at Hawthorne and Lawndale. He came up to me and he kind of like put his arm around me and like, sort of whispered in my ear a little bit, like, dude, just calm down, like yada yada yada. And so I was able to get a decent enough take. I don't think that ever made the resume reel, but it was just like, that's a moment that I will never forget. Like, it was like, I couldn't, of all the things that I wanted to say, the only thought that came to my mind was like, I'm on the floor at Staples Center. I'm on the floor at Staples Center. And so nothing else, nothing else could come out. And so that's probably the one thing that sticks out to me the most. But it wasn't live, and no one ever saw it. So that's that. My first game at Fox Sports West, first game on the sidelines, right? So here's a little TV insider for you, right? Sometimes the open is like the beginning of the show where the play-by-play analysts come on and they preview the game, and then they throw down to the sideline reporter, right? Sometimes that part is recorded. So I get on camera and I say my spiel, and then there's a part where I'm off camera. And so I had all these notes. And so the point that I'm off camera, I just start reading my notes. So I'm just looking down, reading, kind of like the script that I sort of write out, right? So I believe the game may have even been tape delayed. So suffice to say, the game was in Corona. So in Fox Sports West studios were in downtown LA, but the signal went from Houston to LA, right? So in that process, they didn't take the right camera. So the very first hit I did on the sideline, they didn't go to the video or the board or whatever it was that they were supposed to go to. And it's just me looking at a paper the whole time, just reading, when I thought I was off camera or was supposed to be off camera. And so, yeah, I got a text from the boss after that one. But I mean, I don't know if that was on me, but I mean, you always got to be ready. So.
Now I see a Lakers backdrop in your office there. It's my understanding you were involved in something with Game 7 with LA, the Lakers in Boston 2010 finals.
Yeah, so that's probably one of the highlights for me. So this was Channel 2. Man, I mean, and that was the beginning, right? And we got to do so many cool things there just coming up, right? Mm-hmm. Things that a lot of people didn't get a chance to. But so I was able to get credentialed for the finals 08, 09, and 10. Home games only. But so to be in the building during the NBA finals, I mean, that was just a treat in itself. And then you talk about Lakers Celtics. I mean, that's my childhood, right?
Rahshaun, I want to be real clear because some people may not understand. Break down credential. I know what you're saying, but.
So a credential is like a press pass, essentially, right? It gets you in the building, right? And so I was credentialed for those three finals, but Game 7, I was there, same capacity as a production assistant, right? And Game 7, 2010, between the Lakers and Celtics, and man, I mean, you could feel the tension in the building. I mean, you literally could feel it. And it was just one of those nights where neither team was great offensively. Kobe couldn't make a basket at all, but he rebounded the heck out of the basketball, right? But he couldn't make a basket. And the most unlikely of heroes, I believe he may have been Meta World Peace by then. I don't remember if it was Ron Artest, Meta World Peace, what have you. But he makes the basket. The Lakers win. We get the opportunity to go down into the locker room while they're spraying. They're still. It's kind of like the last portion of them spraying champagne and interview some guys. I remember interviewing Jordan Farmer that night. I remember Kobe walking through. There's the locker room, and then once you walk into the locker room, to the right is like the training room, and then to the left is like some, I don't know if it's the weight room or what. It's some other place where we can't go as media. But I remember him walking through the locker room with his wife and he only had 2 kids at the time, just Natalia and Gigi, God rest her soul. And I remember him walking through there, and I mean, it's just a madhouse in there, right? Like every camera, every station you could imagine. And then he's just in like Papa Bear mode, like just watch out, I got my girls with me, yada, yada, yada. And, I had never really seen him like that. And it was a moment, honestly, that I never really understood until I became a husband and a father myself. But just to sort of see him, in that light, was pretty interesting. And then, LA's going to be LA, right? I love my city, but sometimes we win championships, we don't even know how to act, right? So people were outside Staples Center doing Lord knows what. I have no idea. But we were trapped inside Staples Center. They wouldn't let us leave because of all of the the unrest or nonsense, whatever. I heard it was like a police car that got set on fire or something. Not really sure what, but all that was going on, so we couldn't leave. Which I mean, we weren't going to leave anyway because we were going to be there. Jim Hill was going live until about 11:30 or so, so we were going to be there for a while. But and so we were there for a while. I remember going across the street to LA Live once they finally let us out. I saw Josh Powell over there. He was still in his uniform, going to one of the restaurants. And then another buddy of ours who works for the Lakers, a bunch of us kind of went to hang out at his house later that night, and there was like a replay of the game on, and we were all just kind of hanging out, having a good night. The sun beat me home that night, for sure. But it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, of working, in this business. We were in LA. I had to go all the way back to Studio City to get my car because I was working at the station earlier that morning, and there was no way I was going to be able to drive to get to Staples. I actually took the red line to the blue line to Staples, and I was able to get a ride back, back to go pick up my car. But it was just, it was a great night. And as a Laker fan growing up, it was sort of the tip of the iceberg for me, as a sports fan, and being able to be there in that media capacity. But then it sort of wets the palate, right? Because it's like, it's great to be here in this capacity, but you want more, right? Like, I'm here helping Jim. Like, I want to be in that spot where Jim is, right? And so it was great to experience, but also at the same time, like, it was a great learning lesson, a great teacher of how to handle yourself in certain events like that. But it also, it also kind of that hunger, it awakens in you as well, saying, okay, like, this is great, but this still isn't where I want to be.
Rahshaun, I can go on and on and on with you, but you invoke Kobe's name. I see the picture to your right of Kobe, January 26, 2020. Do you remember where you were? What was happening when you got the message about Kobe and Father's Day?
Yeah, it surreal, right? It was a Sunday,
Hmm?
and uh, one of the rare Sundays my wife went to work. She doesn't work on Sundays, but something happened during the week, so she had to go in on a Sunday. Um, and it was overcast. We would even say foggy, where I live. I'm in Carson, and there was something on, and I heard people talking about Kobe, but I didn't really think nothing of it. I just assumed it was from the previous night. 'Cause remember the night before, LeBron had passed Kobe, on, I went for like this on the scoring list, right? And so I just figured they were just continuing to, talk that up. And then and I had my daughter. She was, just a few months at the time, and so, I was sort of up, and she's up, and just sort of getting her ready. And then you start to pay more attention, and then you turn on the TV, and it's like, wait, what? And you sort of like you, you kind of don't believe what you're seeing. And Yeah, that was a tough blow. Kobe was someone who very gracious of his time with me personally, where he didn't have to be, because as I mentioned, like, I was there. I wasn't a reporter on the news. I wasn't on TV. He only saw me there, and I probably didn't always ask him the best questions, right? But he would always indulge me, right? And there was one time where I was a writer, and he was at the Drew League Championship, and I remember he was leaving, and then I was like, well, Kobe's here. I got to get a quote from Kobe, and he's just mobbed, right? And I'm like maybe 5, 10 people deep, and I just throw a question out at him, and he looked me dead in the eye and answered the question. And I like to believe it's because he remembered me, from those days coming up, at Staples. But I mean, that's just kind of who he was. And the interesting thing I'll share with you, last week I was up in Sacramento doing the state championship games, and Sage Hill High School took on San Joaquin Memorial High School. And 4 of the girls on the Sage Hill team were Gigi's teammates with the Mamba team. and Gigi was supposed to go to Sage Hill High School. It's a high school out there in Newport Beach. And the day of the helicopter crash, they were going out to the Mamba Academy. They were going to take on the Fresno Lady Blaze. There were 3 players from that team playing on the San Joaquin Memorial team. This was on this past Saturday. And Sage Hill overcame a 13-point deficit. They come all the way back to win it at the end, right? These are Gigi's teammates. These are Kobe's players, that he coached on the Mamba team. He was going to coach at Sage Hill. Gigi was going to be there at Sage Hill. And it was the first time in my career that I'd ever been speechless after a game and felt like some sort of emotion, right? And the only thing I could say as we signed off was like, folks, you can't make this stuff up. It was just a powerful moment. And Kobe, look, we watched Kobe grow up, right? I was 7th or 8th grade when he came here. He was just 18 years old. So we saw him grow from, a teenager to a man, a husband, a father, all those things. So it was a huge blow for the city and a huge blow for, a lot of us on a personal level.
Wow, very powerful tribute. I consider you also, like Kobe, a girl's dad. And
Yeah.
pulls it in. One, is it true? And then secondly, your daughter, does she, when she first saw you on TV and like, wait a minute, daddy's in the house, and was there any confusion? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's funny. My wife, God bless her, she would, when Summer was very, very young, like I'm talking about like months old, I would be doing like a football game or something, and she would just sort of, have her listen to it or whatnot as she would watch it. But there came a point where I believe it was like right after I started working at KTLA, which was August of 2020. She'd walk up to the TV and she would just kind of point, and you could see her like just sort of like starting to figure it out. And it's a blessing. Like I prayed for this, like to be there during the pandemic. I lost everything, right? At the start of the pandemic, I lost everything. And so to be able to be at a place like KTLA and to be able to start there in the middle of a pandemic, nothing short of a blessing, right? Like I wasn't sure where my career was going, if it was over or what. Like everything was gone, except I had a podcast that I do, but that was it. Like everything had gone. And so but even before this, like I prayed for this, that I would hopefully have a career long enough where my daughter would be able to watch me on TV and be able to recognize me and see it and understand it. And we I feel like we're kind of sort of at that point now. Like her mom quizzes her, and she can tell you where I work and what I do and things of that nature. And she mocks my touchdown calls. She watches some of my shows. She really has become one of my biggest fans, and it's just a treat. It's a joy, but it really is something that I pray for. So I'm just so blessed to see this sort of come to true fruition here. And it's amazing just how much. I mean, she's 2.5 right now, so it's just amazing how much that mind of hers is able to take in and retain and things of that nature. And so it's great, man. It's great.
You're a blessed man. Blessed, you and your wife. So as we get ready to land a plane, before I do, one final thing, talk to the kids who may be out there, kids from South Central LA. I know they call it South Los Angeles. They might be from Nickerson, Imperial Gardens. They might be Imperial Courts. They might be from Jordan Downs, Hacienda. They might be from Compton, anywhere, not just those areas, but speak to those kids who may be a Rahshaun Haylock, who have a dream, a goal, a vision, but I mean, just your leadership thing. Anything you want to say to them?
Yeah, I think, and this is something that has been that I've had to constantly remind myself of, is if you want it, go get it, right? And you have to have faith in yourself, faith in your abilities, and trust in God, to be able to see you through. But there are going to be a lot of doubters, a lot of naysayers, a lot of people that are going to tell you no, but ultimately all you need is one person to tell you yes. And you got to block out all the noise. You got to block out everything else that's going around you and just sort of focus on what it is that you try to accomplish. And you're not racing against anybody else. Your race is with yourself. And that part will eat you up. You know, if you start to see people around you start to have success and you start falling into that comparison trap, well, I've been doing this longer than this per or I feel like I'm better than this per like that stuff will eat you up. And that that don't have nothing to do with you. Right? Like what God has for you is for you. So, you know, you can't fall into that comparison trap, but if you want it, go out there and get it, put in the work, find out what it is that you need to do to get to wherever it is that you that you're trying to get to, and you know, find people that are doing whatever it is that you want to do and reach out to them and let them know who you are, what you're about, and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And you know, they can sort of maybe help you or guide you get to where you're going to go. You know, everybody's not going to be as helpful, but most people generally are. And so, you know, I would say that as well. Don't feel like you have to do it on your own, which is something I have to constantly remind myself of. You know, even to this day. But you know, ultimately at the end of the day, like you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your abilities because people are gonna, especially people of color, like they will tear you down. They will tear you apart. You know, I had a news director once tell me, you know, the reason she didn't hire me was because I can't talk. And if I want to get into the business of talking and I can't talk, then what in the world? And that literally broke me. It took me about 2 years or so to sort of repair myself and get things back together. And I still hear it today. You still hear things about, you know, the way you talk or your voice, or, you know, I don't have like these booming pipes like some other people. But you can't let that stuff affect you. You know, you got to be confident in what you're doing. Yes, be open to criticism, constructive criticism, but at the same time, you got to be yourself. And believe it, and go after it and go get it.
I like that. Very powerful. Go after it. Go get it. Drown out the naysayers. Connect with those who can probably bring you up, and just be motivated within yourself. So let's do my little, just real quick lightning round with you. I mean, this or that. So
Oh, here we
driving
go.
or flying. Which one?
Driving or flying?
Yes.
Flying.
Okay. Cooking or cleaning.
Cooking.
That's okay. All right. I heard that you're a foodie also.
Yeah. Self-proclaimed, yes. But yeah, I enjoy it. Absolutely.
Okay. In light of your business, talking or listening.
You got to be a good listener.
Okay.
You have to be a good listener.
All right. This one may be very controversial, especially with your role that you play. Clippers or the Lakers.
Oh, come on, man.
Okay. All right. And then last but not least, Woodland Hills or Watts.
Woodland Hills or Watts?
Mhm.
Oh man, that's very funny. Uh, I grew up in Watts, right? My wife, ironically enough, used to live in Woodland Hills, and she asked me recently about us moving to Woodland Hills, and I, in a nice way, said, maybe not. I'm a city boy. I like the city. I never really liked the valley, even when I went to school there. I'm a city boy.
Okay. All right. Well, Rahshaun, if people want to connect with you via social media, whatever, how can they connect with you? And
So I'm on Twitter. I'm at R Haylock. That's RHAYLOCK on Twitter, and then on Instagram, I'm at Watch Ray Ray. That's Watch Ray Ray on Instagram, and DMs are open. Feel free to hit me up if you got any questions or whatever. I'm open, and we'll look forward to hearing from you and getting back to you.
All right. Well, Rahshaun, I just again want to thank you very much. And I want to just share this with you, a poem that I recite to myself every day. I've been doing it for about 35 years. In light of everything you just said, and in the listening audience who may be going through the same thing too. It's entitled If You Think. It simply says, if you think you're beaten, you are. You think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win, but think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. If you think you're lost, you're lost. For out in the world, we find success begins with the person's will. Life's battle don't go to the faster or the stronger person, but sooner or later, the one who wins is the one who thinks they can. And you, my friend and young man, have done exactly that. You've stayed the course when you should have quit. You should have been a statistic and all of these other type of things. And you certainly are a a hero of mine. And I mean that from the depths of my heart, especially knowing your background and where you come from, and you making grandmama and mom and everybody else proud. And I just appreciate you stopping by with a poor boy from Compton. That's with a K, Kompton, and sharing with me, bro. And we definitely will stay in contact too.
This was fun. Thanks so much for having me, Ed. Appreciate you.
Here's our coachable moment. Our coachable moment, since we're talking about leadership, and it's something that I practiced when I was in corporate America. It's called MBWA, that it means management by walking around, which simply meant coming out of my office or coming out of your office and going around and checking with your employees, just talking to them about how things are going. Now, I know that a lot of jobs are on a hybrid approach where some are in the office and sometimes you're not in the office. So I'm going to give you a new acrostic, MBCA, management by calling around, just simply picking up the phone and calling your employees and checking on them, making sure they're okay, not just checking them when is that report is going to be due, but checking in with them to see how they're doing, see if they have any particular needs, any personal challenges or issues, because I learned real simply that if you take care of your people, your employees, they will take care of you. So again, I thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of The Deep End with Ed. I urge that you would just share this podcast with others, in particular on our YouTube channel at Deep End with Ed. We're really trying to grow that. So if you can tell your friends, share with your friends, and tell them to subscribe to that page, we certainly would appreciate that. And so we always like to encourage individuals to, again, write to us. If you have something you want to say, you can hit us up on Facebook or Instagram at Deep End with Ed, and just kind of let us know how we're doing. It's very important to keep our pulse on the community as to what's going on. Very grateful, thankful to my director and producer, Nicole Robinson, for the great work that she's been doing with these podcasts. And then I just want to remind you that the Deep End with Ed podcast is a Beyond the Mask Conversations production. Thank you and God bless.